Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Letty, and today we are talking about Codes of Courage by A L Sowards. So this is a book that I got in NetGalley and I just wanted to give you guys a bit of review of it. We are going to have spoilers in this review, but I will warn you before those things start so that if you want to click off, you can, or if you want to stick around, you can. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So, Codes of Courage takes place in World War II, and it follows the lives of three main characters. Our first character is Carl. He is an Austrian young man, and when he's 17 years old, his father is killed by a Nazi officer who had previously been a close friend of their family. And Carl, and his two younger sisters flee Austria. They're being chased by the Nazis who want the information that Carl's father had. And they're able to escape. However, they are separated from each other while escaping. And so they have this plan to meet up in England. So Carl, he escapes on his own and he gets to England. His sisters have not arrived yet. He wants to join the Navy and fight against the Nazis, but as an Austrian-born man, he cannot join the Navy, so he joins the Merchant Marines instead, which the Merchant Marines were the civilian companies that transported goods different places, food, supplies, even ammo and fuel. Then the second character that we follow, her name, which my mind just lost it, I think it's Millie. Her name is Millie, and her father, her father is an American diplomat, so she's lived all around the world, and she actually met Carl in Switzerland, and then they lost each other again. They had started exchanging letters, but some got lost in the mail, and then her father moved locations. He was transferred to Britain, and so she didn't have a way to tell Carl that they were moving, so they stopped their communication. But anyway, her father is now stationed as the American diplomat in London, and her mother is actually a British citizen, and her mother's brother, her uncle, is a vice admiral in the British Navy. And she is really, really good at puzzles and codes and things like that, so her uncle gets her a job at Bletchley Park, which was the British code-breaking compound of World War II. So she is breaking codes for the Navy and for the Army. Then our third character, his name is Rolf, and he is an officer he might not be an officer. He's a soldier in the German Navy, and he's actually the soldier on the submarines that encodes and decodes things with the Enigma machines and sends out codes. So he's a communications officer in the German Navy. So we follow throughout the book these three characters and how their lives kind of interact with each other. And it's just a really beautiful book, I think, because it's you can definitely see how the writer was trying to show you the way that God orchestrates our lives to impact others, even if we don't know it. Obviously, Rolf, he's in the German Navy, and Carl's in the English Merchant Marines. They're on opposite sides of the world. They don't know each other, and yet what's going on in their own lives and their actions are actually affecting each other. They just don't know it because they don't know each other, but we as the reader knows it, and God knows it. And so throughout the story, we really, really see how God uses our actions, or the actions of the characters, to impact others' lives, even when they don't know it themselves, because they don't know these people. So that's just kind of the basis of what we're working with. And now we're going to get into some more spoilerish plot points. I want to stop you guys right here. If you're not here for the spoilers, you should probably turn it off now. But if you are, let's go. So Carl and Millie actually meet up in London, and they start exchanging letters, and they fall in love, and they eventually get married. So that makes her work it makes her work, she feels like her code breaking work is all the more important because now she's like protecting her husband in a way as she excuse me, as she code breaks, because he's out there on those ships. So that's something special going on in her story. Meanwhile, Rolf, every time he gets leave and goes home, he's like learning that his wife is being less and less supportive of Hitler and the war. And he's like, well, sweetie, I'm an officer in the German Navy. Like, we can't do this. And one time when he's at home, he finds out that his wife is aiding escaping Jews. And so that just really shocks him because he's like, oh my goodness, like my wife is a traitor and I can't turn her in because she's my wife and I love her. But then if I don't turn her in, I'm a traitor too. So he's dealing with that in his own personal life. And then meanwhile, Carl is dealing with the fact that he can't find his sisters. He goes to London at one point and he finds out that his youngest sister, Anna, who is 8, did make it to London. She made it to their rendezvous point, but then the building she was staying in was bombed. So he believes her to be dead, and his 16-year-old sister never made it to London. So he's dealing with the fact that that he's been separated from his sisters, and he believes one to be dead, and the other one he has no idea where she is or if she's okay, what country she's in, and so he's dealing with that, and and that's making his hate for the Nazis grow. But at the same time, he's trying to be the person God wants him to be. And God doesn't want us to hate anyone. So even though he's like, oh my goodness, I hate the Nazis, at the same time, he's like, I want to be compassionate as God wants me to be. So Carl eventually ends up in the Navy. And Millie gets pregnant. And her parents are being reassigned to America after America joins the war. And so Carl is like, well, why don't you go with your parents to America because they'll be able to help you with the baby where I can't. And so he puts her on a passenger ship that his naval ship, because he's on a Corvette ship, which they escort merchant marine ships to different harbors. So he puts her on a passenger ship that he knows his ship is going to be escorting. And then what happens is that Rolf's submarine ends up torpedoing her passenger ship, and she ends up in the water. And so Carl goes out as part of the rescue team, and they rescue her, and they put her back on the boat. And then they also catch the submarine, and so all those people are taken prisoner, and Carl is a part of the boarding party for the submarine, and he finds Rolf, who is unconscious and has been left for dead, but he's like, oh no, he's not dead. And he feels just impressed in his spirit that the Lord wants him to love his enemies, and so he decides to save Rolf's life and pull him off the submarine. But in doing so, he does not get off the submarine in time, and Carl actually dies. And so that was really, really sad for me and really, really shocking. It was just so sad. And I was, up until that point, I was like, this book is 5 stars, this book is 5 stars, this book is 5 stars. And then that happened, and I was just so shocked. And I am the kind of person who I just want happy endings for all of my characters. And so to have him die, shortly before the end of the book, I was just so upset. And I know that, so Codes of Courage is actually kind of like a prequel to another of A L Sowards' books, or a book that he contributed to, called Heirs of Falcon Point. And Heirs of Falcon Point takes place in the present day, where and that was Carl's home. The home that he and his sisters fled from is called Falcon's Point. So Heirs of Falcon Point takes place in the present day, where the descendants of each of the 3 siblings go back to that home in Austria and kind of reclaim it. And so they tell you in that book what happens to each of the siblings. So they say in that book that the character that is a descendant of Carl, he says, oh, well, my grandfather or great-grandfather, whatever it is, died during the war. So I guess if you had read that book first, then you would know that Carl dies. I had not read that book first, and I had not heard of that book before, so I did not know that Carl was going to die, and it just really, really hit me. Anyway, after that, there's only like 3 chapters left in the book at that point, and it only takes about 1 chapter for Millie to get remarried, and it is like a couple years. Like 1 chapter spans like 3 or 4 years. So like her son is born and he's already like an older toddler when she does remarry, so it is a lot of time for her. But since it's only 1 chapter, it's not a lot of time for the reader. You know, like it just felt to me like it was like, oh, he's dead. Oh, here's 1 chapter. 3 years are passed. She's getting remarried. And I know that he had to do that because if you've read Heirs of Falcon Point, then you know this guy had another, like, he had a different last name than what was Carl's last name, because, you know, it talks about the fact that his great-grandfather died in the war and that his great-grandmother got remarried and blah, blah, blah. So if you've read that book, then you kind of expect all this to happen in Codes of Courage, but I had not. So I was like, okay, first of all, break my heart, Carl dies, and then second of all, like, Millie gets remarried so quickly. It's just crazy. So yeah, that was the reason that that was the big reason that Codes of Courage went from 5 stars to 4 stars for me, because 1, I did not want to see him die, and 2, it just felt like her remarriage was just really quick. It was like 4 years of time, but it was only 1 chapter, so it's crazy. And then in the very last chapter, basically 30 years have passed, and her youngest daughter, or her youngest son is getting married to Rolf and his wife's youngest daughter, and they don't know they're connected to each other until the wedding reception, when they're talking about their war experiences, and she's talking about losing her husband, and he's like, I think I know that guy, that's the guy that saved my life. And they're talking about it, and they realize that Carl's sacrifice, that the fact that he sacrificed his own life to save this German officer's life is the reason that this German officer was able to go home and have more kids. And now that youngest daughter that he had after the war is marrying Millie and her second husband's youngest son. So it really shows you the way God orchestrates things in our lives and the way he uses us to impact others. And even, years down the road when we're long gone, our actions still have created those ripples. And it's just, the whole book is kind of showing you how God works our lives as a tapestry. Like, I'm sure you've heard that metaphor that, like, our lives are just one big tapestry, and each life is like a string in the tapestry that intertwines with somebody else's string and somebody else's string, and in the end it just makes this big picture. And so I really, really loved the way that A L Sowards depicted that in the book. And he does so a lot through one line that this line says, God put him in my path. And that's what Carl, when Carl is dying and they take him back to the ship, and they take him to sick bay, and Millie is able to say goodbye to him because she's on the ship since she got rescued after being torpedoed. His last words for her is like, I'm sorry, he's sorry that he's dying. God put him in my path. Basically, he's saying, like, God put him there so that I would help him. God told me to help him. And that line, God put him in my path, is used several times throughout the novel, which I think just was a really, really great way to show how God uses our life's events to impact others. So that was just a really, really quick recap and review of Codes of Courage. I would definitely recommend reading it if you haven't yet. Definitely recommend it, even though some characters get a sadder ending than others. It's still really, really good, and I would definitely recommend it.